Hi, welcome everyone. It's 6 p.m. Welcome to the Gentile Resilience District project at Dilo Wetlands Community Design Update Meeting. Today is November the 4th and it's 6 p.m. Thank you so much for joining us virtually this evening. Please, I just want to go over some house rules before we start this meeting. Please keep your computer or phone muted while the presentation is live. Do not unmute your audio unless you are speaking for the benefit of the group. So we appreciate if you keep yourself muted. We will hold, there is 3 ways that we will hold questions during the Q&A period. One of the ways is that you can utilize the chat. So if you use the link at the WebEx, the Zoom link to join this meeting tonight, you can type your questions using the chat feature at any time during the presentation. Also, there will be a moment during the Q&A that you can unmute yourself and you can speak and ask your questions aloud. The third option is text. You can text us questions to 504-442-4642. And you can text us questions during the presentation. Also, please note that the meeting is being recorded and it will be available for public viewing, hopefully by next Thursday. And you can go to www.nola.gov/resilience-sustainability/gentili-district/dealer-wetlands. And also I added the text number to the chat box and the link to the project on the chat box as well. So tonight, speakers and attendees that we have with us is from the City Gentile Resilience District Program and Project Team. My name is Lisbeth Pedroso. I'm the Community Outreach for the project. We also have Mary Kincaid, Gentile Resilience Program Manager. We also have Rodriga Medrano. She is the Gentile Resilience District Project Manager. On the design team, we have Atiana Cordova, Community Engagement Person. We have Nina Rains, Project Manager. We have Joel Tillery, Technical Lead. Andrew Doyle, Landscape Architect. And now just to say the departments that are supporting this project, we have the Department of Public Works, the Department of Parks and Parkways, and the Office of Transportation. And now the program and project review is going to be given by Rodriga Medrano. Rodriga.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to be going over the project itself. You can go to the next slide. So this project is the Dilo Wetlands project, and we're using existing forested wetlands to reduce the street flooding, to restore the wetland ecology and provide locally accessible recreational and educational opportunities to the neighborhood. This project area is located west of London Avenue Canal, just across from Dilo University. As you can see, this is where it will be located. You can go to the next slide. And this is just the area of where the project is. This is the former Francis Gregory Junior High School and residential neighborhood surrounding. Go to the next slide. So the project goals and benefits are we're looking to manage the urban water, reduce the localized flooding, and improve the water quality in the area. Also to restore ecology, improve existing forest and wetland conditions, and to act for community access, create recreational and educational opportunities within the forest and the wetland site. On the right here are the benefits that we're looking to achieve with this project in the future and long term. You can go to the next slide. So currently we are in the final design phase, and we're looking to do final construction very soon. Okay, and yes. All right, and I'm going to turn it over to Atiana Cordova, the Design Team Community Engagement Lead, to tell you more about what we're looking for and looking to do for the community as far as our goals for this project. Atiana?
Thank you, Rodrika. So as Elizabeth and Rodrika mentioned, my name is Atiana Cordova, and I am the founder of Waterblock, and we've been leading the outreach as part of the design team for this project. You can go to the next slide. A little bit of context to how we got here today to provide design updates. So within our firm, we lead with the framework of listen, learn, envision, and co-create. So through this project, we've been looking at different ways to engage with community members and stakeholders to garner input for the project, to see what is desired and what's not desired for the final project itself. We've done this through stakeholder meetings dating back to October 2020. We've also did neighborhood canvassing, where we went into the immediate vicinity of the project and within that neighborhood and talk with residents as far as them just getting information about the project, but also understanding what it is that they want to see in the project. We have also held community leaders virtual forums where we met with existing leaders within the community to understand, one, what they also want to see, but also build better connections with residents and those that they have connections with. We've also held pop-up events, so trying to reach a broader audience and a more diverse audience with this project. So hosting pop-up events in commercialized districts to get some foot traffic from other stakeholders who may not have known about the project, and just to once again garner additional input for the desired result of the project in the end. We've also gone in front of the city's design review committees to get approval for the project. So thankfully we've got approved so far. So this is how we've gotten to this point as well. We've held agency coordination meetings with different city agencies, but also local stakeholder groups, including universities. We've held some in-person community meetings, some virtual community meetings as well, and just a different variety of forms of just trying to reach a wide range of stakeholders to get input for this project. And you can go to the next slide. So for tonight's agenda, based on all of that feedback that we've heard over the past year, we're going to provide a design update, which incorporates a lot of that information that has been gathered. We're also going to discuss the site accessibility, and we're also going to share some new updates regarding the Pratt Drive reconstruction and bike integration. And to lead us into that discussion, we have Joel Tillery and Andrew Doyle, who will take it from there.
All right, thank you, Atiana. So again, welcome everyone. My name is Joel Tillery. I am a water resources civil engineer. I've had the opportunity to work on this. Hope that some of you we've talked to before. So we, as Atiana mentioned, we've been working on this for a little bit now, and wanted to share some updates with you guys on the design, as well as talk about a couple of new things that for those of you who have been engaged may not have seen before. So to start, just want to kind of recap some of the things that maybe you have seen. And Elizabeth, if you want to click through some of these slides, this is kind of animated, showing some of the different features of the project. You can just quickly jump through here. So as you may have seen, we have an access road off of Pratt Drive that will lead into the project site with some parking along that access road. As Rodrika mentioned, one of the goals of the project is to reduce flooding. So the way that we're going to do that is to capture water from the city streets and pump it into the wetland area. There will be vehicular and bus and bicycle parking with a turnaround loop for people to access in and out of the park. Nature playground will be accessible for kids and adults alike, young at heart. Buffers and site perimeter. That's one of the things we'll talk about tonight is some of the perimeter control and accessibility issues that we've incorporating feedback from the residents that we've talked to. Walking trails and boardwalks are an integral part of the project that will circulate around and through the project site. There is a concept to, at some point in the future, connect across the Linden Avenue Canal. And that is from the Dillard Wetlands project site, the property that the city owns, across the canal to city, also city property that's currently the site of the Parks and Parkways facility. We have Danny McElmurray here from Parks and Parkways tonight, so thank you, Danny, for joining. Observation areas for wildlife and bird watching and seating areas of reflection are going to be spaced throughout the project site. And next one is an outdoor classroom in a space that's going to be dedicated for nature-based education. This is really a feature that we're going to be building on. Atiana will talk a little bit about some of the design steps we're going to take, working with educators and having a roundtable and a forum to really begin to fill up that space with what is desired from an educator standpoint. Right now, it's kind of a blank slate, and we're looking to advance that design through the engagement with those educators. And then integral with the boardwalk, there's going to be a shade structure that will be overlooking what you may have talked about or heard us talk about, a cypress pond in the past. So, one of the key elements of the project site is restoring the ecology and the vegetation. So that will be a very nice area with, planted vegetation and cypress trees will be circling that water feature and those water features that you see represented throughout the project site. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Doyle. He's got a few additional slides here to kind of walk through some additional details. Andrew?
Go ahead and advance, Elizabeth. Okay, so we're just going to go through the site plan with a series of enlargements here. So we're starting kind of in the, can you go back one, please? Sorry. I'm still seeing the second enlargement on my end. Perfect. So we're starting here at the Pratt Drive area with the access point. So you can see the parking is largely located kind of outside of the interior of the forest. And people would be able to park and then take this kind of boardwalk trail system that goes through a relatively low-lying area of the site. And we're doing that to try to avoid bringing in extra fill into this pretty low area. And you can see the pumping station structure and the access drive kind of slides between it and the property boundary and continues on. And then in the top right corner, you'll see a glimpse of kind of what Joe was describing as a cypress pond. I want to point out overall, the topography of the site kind of is lowest at this point and climbs up in elevation to the other corner of the property. So I created a pretty good opportunity for us to locate a lot of the programmed portions of the site design in this lower lying corner where a lot of the water will be stored as well. So it creates a unique opportunity to kind of overlap the water management with this kind of programmed development for the user's experience. You can go ahead one slide. Okay, so we're moving further to the south or planned east here, to the right on the image. So you can see the nature playground and how it interacts with the bus drop-off area. So we're creating this kind of synergy where if school groups came to the site, it would be really easy for them to access the nature-based playground in relation to where a bus would drop them off. And then you can see kind of rendered in the top left corner, there's a dark gray path that loops and connects to that boardwalk that I was talking about in the previous slide. I wanted to point out that that path is considered or envisioned to be ADA accessible. So it's kind of like a small loop that connects back from the entryway through the boardwalk and then interacts with that outdoor classroom space. And then these kind of tan pathways you see further to the right of the image are envisioned to be looser, like gravel type pathways. So there's this progression from highly programmed to very passive as you move further and deeper into the forest of the site. You can go ahead. Okay, this is along London Avenue Canal in that top left corner. this is a pretty good view of the shade structure and the boardwalk system, and you'll notice this waterway kind of meanders through the site, and we manipulated the topography to try to not fight the water and identified the existing areas where the low points are located, and kind of are envisioning that we could sculpt the landscape and connect the fragmented areas where water currently sits. So the goal there is to try to maximize the circulation of the water and to increase the depth in certain areas to allow different forest communities and to mitigate the ability for mosquitoes to breed and populate. And then you'll see at the top corner, we've identified the current location of the mosquito, termite, and rodent control research stations, and we're envisioning those to stay pretty much where they're located. And the trail network is laid out to not have a detrimental effect to their operations, but still provide access on their own. Go ahead, Elizabeth. Okay, so this is kind of a conceptual image. We started studying a lot of the site design in 3D recently, specifically the boardwalks and the shade structures. This is kind of an overview from the Orleans Parish School Board corner and the just along Van Drive, looking back towards Dillard University and the Outfall Canal. So it gives you a kind of a feel of how things would be laid out in relation to one another. Go ahead. And this is a closer up image, very conceptual, but we're starting to think about forms for this shade structure and the location of this. We're proposing this where it is and the shape of it to try to create a large shaded space so we can integrate some seating that interacts well with the outfall structure of the cypress pond, so that it could offer a interpretive opportunity for users. So there would be seating and signage and things that would illustrate how the wetland takes in stormwater from the surrounding area and reduces flooding. So a teaching opportunity that kind of connects to that outdoor classroom further down the boardwalk. Go ahead. And that's one more view looking from the classroom back towards the boardwalk. And then this is kind of that highest, more passive corner of the site. We met with the community a lot about buffers, and residents along Virgil expressed their concerns about the idea of storing extra stormwater in the site. So as well as people, the public having increased access and being able to see into their backyards. So we've studied a lot of the buffering of the site's perimeter, and Joel's going to speak in more detail about that in a second, but I did want to point out along the property boundary, kind of where that buffer and fencing label is located, you can see about 4 to 6 white lines that are kind of meandering back and forth. And that's essentially going to be like a levee that we're constructing on that side of the site, so that if a major storm event occurs, the water is kept within the site and not able to top that and go into the private properties adjacent to the site. So there's several different, the pathway acts as an initial berm, and then we have a secondary one that's 2 or 3 feet higher than the outfall elevation of the drainage system of the site. So we've built in a kind of series of defense mechanisms for that purpose. Go ahead. I'll turn it over to Joel to talk about accessibility and site buffers.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Next slide, Elizabeth. So when we started this project and started talking with residents, one of the goals was to be able to provide a nature park and an asset that all the residents in the community could enjoy. And one of the aspects of that was to provide multimodal access. So vehicles, school buses for children to come visit the site, as well as people that would be walking to the site and or biking to the site. And so we've identified some access locations and some access means with all those goals in mind. And one of those goals, and it's very important to the residents, we've heard pretty clearly that they want to maintain the neighborhood character. So we've adapted that and considered that in laying out the features that I'll talk about here in a second. We also want to meet code requirements. This is going to be an accessible site. We want to have a location for emergency vehicle access. We have a means to do that. Early on, you may remember we talked about a loop road that would come from Pratt Drive and then connect all the way through, and we've removed that based on feedback. But we do have a way for for emergency vehicles to loop through the site, like I say, in case of emergency. Andrew mentioned some ADA accessible trails. So we have parking facilities for ADA. And then lastly, we want to make sure we address security concerns or considerations, perimeter control around the site. And that's, again, some feedback that we've heard from residents in the area. Next slide. So we have three main access points, one for multimodal access off of Pratt Drive, adjacent to the old Francis Gregory High School, or junior high rather. Two locations for pedestrian and bike access off of Van Drive and Rain Drive, and a local pedestrian access off of the base of the London Avenue Canal levee. We're not intending to provide any sort of signage or wayfinding for that access point, as residents have expressed concerns of people parking on Virgil and using that as an access point. But we do want to provide people that would be or currently use the levee for walking and recreation to be able to have a place to access and punch into the wetlands and access the trails and boardwalk network. And as I mentioned, there will be a way for emergency vehicles to come in off of Pratt and then navigate through Rain Drive if the situation presented itself. And you can see that in the red arrows. So the part of the trail network would serve as an emergency vehicle lane if it was needed. Next slide. So currently, Pratt Drive is a one-way street. The residents of the area know this. So in the future, residents would, or people that would visit the site would come from northbound and be taking a left into the site to access the park. As you can see in this picture. Next slide. When you turn left, currently you would see this large gate that's controlling access to the school board's property. There will be a gate in the future to provide some perimeter control. The concept of that gate was going to be replaced, and we're working on developing a concept that would be integrated with the site design as well as the perimeter fencing that I'll mention here in a second. Andrew mentioned the parking that's along the access road. And you can kind of just see a cross-section view of this. There's an existing power line, and the parking would be within that easement. The entryway to the right of that, and then the multi-use path is immediately adjacent. So it provides both vehicular access as well as pedestrian access into the site. Next slide. Just continuing a little further along the access road, you can see in the section at the bottom, you have the vehicle and bus access on the left. And there's a low-lying area to the right, this kind of wooded area where there's a multi-use trail boardwalk. So you can see that the area is going to be low, and to get into the site, there'll be a boardwalk that would navigate and keep people's feet dry as you get further into the site. Next slide. Okay, so perimeter control. If you click again, Elizabeth. based on the feedback that we've heard, we're moving in the direction of providing a fencing around the entire perimeter of the site. One of the options that we have and the direction that we're leaning for the majority of the site is shown there at the bottom right. More of a steel commercial fence, a little bit more expensive, but long-term better for maintenance, and more capital expense, less operating and maintenance cost in the future. Just a better overall feature. On the along the London Avenue Canal, since those aren't areas adjacent to residents, we felt that reducing the cost of that would be desirable, so that those funds could be spent on features like the nature playground and the shade structure, and putting more dollars to things that people are going to enjoy that are going to be features of the park. So more of a vinyl coated chain link fence like you see in that picture at the top. And again, the gate concept is to be determined. Next slide. These are just some additional options. Part of that chain link fence along the London Avenue Canal could include some like tennis screening, just to provide a visual barrier between the project site and the London Avenue Canal. And those are, and then what you see in the B, C, and D are just some additional designs or options for the steel fence that would be around the majority of the site. Next slide. Okay, last thing I want to talk about tonight is the reconstruction of Pratt Drive, and an opportunity that we're now pursuing that involves integrating some striping and dedicated bike lanes along Pratt Drive. So next slide, Elizabeth. One of the things we think about in planning the site is how people are going to navigate to the Dillard Wetlands project. And I mentioned they'll be coming with vehicles, be walking and biking. Currently, Pratt Drive is one way, so for vehicular access, it'll be coming primarily from the north. But there, people are going to be biking, and to come from the south and up Pratt Drive, you'd be kind of going against traffic. Next slide. So there are some dedicated bike lanes along Paris, both existing as well as planned as part of the Moving New Orleans Bikes. So we saw this as an opportunity with the pending reconstruction of Pratt Drive, to do a striping plan that would allow bike traffic that's coming along Pratt to take a right, Paris rather, would take a right onto Pratt Drive and come directly into the project site. And it would include some signage, some wayfinding to identify the park and provide a means for people to navigate there to experience the park. Next slide. As I mentioned, the Pratt Drive reconstruction has been in design for the last year or so, and based on our work with the Department of Public Works, that effort is nearing completion. The planned reconstruction effort for Pratt Drive is just that, a full reconstruction, where they'll tear down the road all the way to the drain lines and the sewer lines and water lines, and replace those in kind. That work, as I understand it, is slated to begin or to go to bid sometime in the first quarter or second quarter of next year. And that timing works well with the work associated with the Dillard Wetlands project site. Next slide. So, once that Pratt Drive reconstruction is complete, and there's not currently, as part of that effort, plans to do any sort of striping, we can come in as part of this project and do some dedicated striping that would allocate dedicated parking spaces along Pratt, as well as bike lanes to navigate to the site. This is just a rendering of the existing conditions. Again, one-way traffic coming south, and not dedicated parking, but kind of ad hoc parking along the left side and the right side of the road. Next slide. So this is one of the concepts that we've been talking about. It would not entail redirecting the vehicular traffic. One-way traffic would still be coming southbound, but the bike traffic would be going northbound would be on the right. You know, if you're looking back to the north, bike traffic would be to the north and be in a contraflow pattern or in the opposite direction of the vehicular traffic. As well as for bikes coming southbound, they would share the lane with the vehicular traffic. Next slide. This is just another iteration of that particular concept. Instead of just having the bike lane directly adjacent to the parking, there'd be a slight buffer that provides a little bit better condition for bikers and a little safer safer access, given the buffer between a dedicated parking space and the bike lane. Next slide. So this is what it looks like in cross section. You can kind of see the cars coming towards you in the image, and that would be coming southbound. The bikes going northbound in a dedicated bike lane with a buffer and parking on both sides. Next slide. And this is an image of what that looks like. So you can see the car coming towards you in the picture, and the bike lane going in an opposite direction. So that's a contraflow pattern. And again, there's parking on both sides. So we're kind of leaning in this direction as far as the bike lane configuration, because it doesn't upset the normal parking that currently happens on Pratt. And it feels like this meets some of the goals of providing vehicular access as well as bike access to the park. Next slide. Another option that we've talked about is a two-way bike lane. That would entail a bike lane moving northbound as well as coming southbound. One of the things this would do is this would further narrow the vehicular traffic, as well as remove some of the parking along one side of the street. So the previous concept is a little less disruption to the current patterns, but this would provide some advantages to bike traffic, having the ability to move both northbound and southbound. Next slide. And this is just an example of that. So adjacent to City Park, there's Marconi Drive. You all have likely seen this. So there's bike traffic that goes north and south. There's a dedicated buffer. And you can see some of the buffer, the bollards here that are between the travel lane and the bike lanes. Next slide. And just another image of that a little further north on Marconi. Next slide. Okay, and that brings us to the end of the presentation tonight. As Rodrika mentioned, we are in the final design stage and moving towards a RDRC meeting that's also a public meeting sometime in February, with construction anticipated to start in the third or fourth quarter of next year. And with that, I will turn it back over to Atiana.
Thank you, Joel. And thank you for everyone who's still on the call. We don't take y'all's time for granted. So thank you for still being a part of this conversation tonight. So as of now, we want to really turn over the conversation, the focus to everyone who's joined tonight who may have questions, and really start a discussion around that. It seems like we have one question in the chat. So if you do have a question, feel free to add it to the chat as well, but I'm just going to read them off. And then anyone from the design team, feel free to take the question. So the first question we have is around access. So the question is, are these fence options for London Avenue side or Virgil Boulevard? And what fencing will there be along Virgil, if any? So it may help to go back to those slides also. I believe that was slides 29. We're starting with 29. So Joe, did you want to take that question? Is Joe still with us?
He's muted.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. I was like, did he drop off?
I'm back. So the plan currently is to wrap the entire perimeter of the site and with a fence with different materials. The yellow in the slide represents the fence option that you see in the lower right, which is a kind of steel fence, a commercial ornamental looking fence. And the fence along London Avenue Canal, there would also be a fence, but we're looking for a lower cost because people are not directly adjacent to that all the time. Not directly adjacent to residents' property, that is.
So can I just ask a follow-up question to that, which is, so I live right on Virgil, and this is really exciting that y'all are doing this. And thank you so much. First of all, we've been incredibly impressed with how thoughtful and responsive the team has been, and events in our neighborhood and events online. It's been a great process to be a part of. And yeah, I mean, my backyard is the property. And so if this is going to happen, I'd love to be able to walk my baby or bike back there. And so many of our neighbors already have fences up that it seems repetitive or redundant to have a fence on top of everyone already having a fence. So that's really the question is, are we going to have to go all the way out to Paris, which is a really busy street, to go all the way around in order to access the site? Or will there be any option for Virgil residents to be able to walk or bike to the site?
I'll try to take that one, Rodrika. You may want to chime in. We felt that there was a need for the city to establish their own perimeter instead of relying on the existing fences. It's a little bit hit or miss with respect to the types of fences and the conditions that they're in. And so the solution was for the city to establish their own fence line offset from the property line. And right now, we're not contemplating providing, gates or access points at each resident's property. Potentially something we could work through, but leaning in the direction of people would access through those dedicated points. If you are a resident on Virgil and you can walk down the street and come along the levee, then you have that access. Otherwise, yeah, you would have to come out to Paris and then back up through Rain Drive. To get to the site. That would be another way to get there.
Yes, I agree with that as well. That's basically what we're looking to do is only one access point. And it's mainly to stop the disturbances and the foot traffic that were some other complaints or concerns from residents regarding the area and the activities.
So I know, Julie, that answers your question. I would say on a case-by-case basis, it could maybe be considered, but at this point, we are definitely looking at just having those dedicated access points.
As a resident, that's disappointing that we'll have to take our kids more than a mile. It's unsafe. Speaking of that safety concern, that's disappointing to hear that we will be next to such a big, beautiful thing, but we'll have to go out to major roads, or use bicycles to get in. City Park is not fully fenced. Audubon Park is not fully fenced, and there's neighbors along all those properties. So I'm also fearful that the cost of the fence is going to eat up other essential parts of the program. It's a large amount of fencing.
Yes.
There's already a lot of properties fenced. Next.
I was going to say, the fencing portion has been discussed. So that is considered in the budget as well. When we first rolled out the project and had a few community engagements, there were questions about unwanted visitors being able to access the site behind their homes. And so we wanted to fence the entire area. And so there wouldn't be those visitors coming back. There was a area along the levee that was originally open. And so we were getting some concerns from residents that people were hanging out and were in that area. at the time. So that's what prompted the decision to place a fencing around the entire premises.
And this is Nina. The location of the entrance from London Avenue Canal was initially closer to the end of Virgil Drive. And it was kind of moved further to the center based on public comments. So I guess we would have to, see if I think that would be the only other location, I think it's kind of just that offset. I guess might have to do a poll or something if, how many folks would like to have it closer to Virgil Street and how many folks would prefer having it more centered so that it doesn't attract people at Virgil Street. I know people were concerned about people driving and parking at the end of Virgil Drive to access from that point instead of the main access point, which prompted the move to make it more central so that it's truly just for kind of neighborhood folks that want to walk there. But yeah, I think the back entrance point location, maybe we need to send out a follow-up poll.
Yeah, I agree, Nina. I think a poll would be good to have or good to do in this particular circumstance, just to get more views of those residents that will be sharing this area, just to see what is most preferred.
Well, thank you all for weighing in on that. I do want to be mindful that there are some questions in the chat though. So if you do have a question, please feel free to put in the chat first, just so that we're making sure that even those that may not want to speak still have a chance to get their questions answered as well. But thank you all for asking those questions so far. So we have a few more questions relating to the buffer. Another question asks, how far will the fencing be from the property lines? So Joe or Nina, if you want to chime in on that question, then I'll ask the second part.
So it'll be right on the property line, about 5 feet off of the property line.
And then next, how far back will the berm be?
About 20 to 30 feet, and it varies depending on where you are on the site. Andrew could speak to that better than I can, and possibly, Elizabeth, if you want to scroll to the slide that shows the buffer. One of the maybe.
Yeah. The location of that is driven by a number of factors. One of them is the location of nice existing trees. So we were trying to minimize having to cut down desirable tree species and specimen that are well established, along with providing enough of an offset where we have ability to put some drainage in on the private side of the berm, because since we're building that ridge line, we're going to have to install like a bioswale or some kind of piping that pulls water under the berm and into the site so that the runoff from the private properties that currently flows into the site doesn't get trapped behind the berm, causing standing water issue. So there's some drainage design and forest ecology factors that go into the location of the berm, but it varies from, like Joel said, about 25, 30 feet to as much as 50 in some places.
And if that doesn't answer your question, please feel free to ask a follow-up just so we can make sure you're getting the information that you need. Also related to fencing, we have another question that asks, is there options for natural fencing rather than just the metal ones that have been shown tonight?
So we've gone back and forth a lot on natural buffers versus fenced buffers, and we're just based on the feedback that we've heard, we've settled on both essentially, a fenced option as well as revegetated buffer. We didn't talk about it, but that area immediately behind Virgil and Rain, as part of the project, it would be initially cleared to construct that buffer or that berm that Andrew mentioned. So it'd be clearing out that vegetation and the trash, some of the trash that's back there. And so it will initially be cleared. Honestly, we would like some feedback from people and possibly another poll as to the preference for that buffer zone long term, whether it would be more of a grassed buffer with wildflower, like a wildflower meadow, or if people prefer more of a forested buffer in the long term. So if people have opinions about that, share them in the chat or reach out to us and share your opinion with respect to your preference on the type of buffer. Andrew, you want to add to that?
No, I think it's nice to get different perspectives because this is kind of directly tied to that access question. So getting more feedback from everyone on what's preferred along Virgil, I think will help us finalize that.
And I think that's the majority of the questions for the fencing. So we're going to transition a little bit, but I do want everyone to keep in mind that like it's been shared, we're going to send out a follow-up survey, a little bit more details about the fence options so that you can weigh in if you aren't able to tonight, or if you have other ideas as you marinate on the presentation. So definitely look out for that survey to come in the next few days. And it seems like we have some suggestions in the chat box that we'll notate also. So then another question asks, will parking area allow for water retention?
So it's more of a site grading plan question. Are you talking about I think you're referencing the parking within the project site. And if so, the current plan is for the parking to be elevated to where it won't flood, based on pumping the water into the site. Other areas of the site would be inundated, but the parking itself, based on the current grading plan, and Andrew can speak to this, doesn't account for those areas to go underwater during an extreme event. Andrew, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we've kind of talked about recently in the design meetings. The overall goal is to try to get the majority of the site to just kind of collect and discharge the water into the detention areas we're creating so that it's internally draining. So the site itself is not producing runoff, and we're also taking in water from the surrounding streets. So it kind of acts as like a giant sponge in effect. So, one other thing, that we will have to have conventional pavement in some areas for ADA purposes. But aside from that, the majority of the site will be permeable.
All right, so our next topic of questions, it seems, is coming around maintenance. So the first question being, how will the gates and hours be managed if the entire property is fenced in? So more of a general question. And then we have another question that asks, is there any additional information that you can provide about the entrance on rain? So we're gonna start with those first two questions.
So we do have Parks and Parkways represented tonight, and they are intended to be the steward and for the project site, since their facility is right across the canal. And the fencing and the gates is something that we're still in conversation with them about the operating hours. We would look for feedback from the residents as far as hours of operation. I would suggest that daylight hours for vehicle access would be appropriate for the project site. And I may be speaking out of turn with respect to the city operating that, but yeah, that's from our perspective, I guess, and from the feedback that we've heard from residents, that would be a starting point to that conversation. Danny,
I think the feedback we've gotten was definitely like kind of a daylight park, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's most of our parks that are fenced
We usually post hours. Typically they run from 8 to 6, depending on if it's winter or summer. That end time can vary between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. Depending on winter to summer. But otherwise, usually the parks don't open until 8.
And do you mind just introducing yourself, Danny, just for those who?
Oh, sorry. This is Danny McElmurray from Parks and Parkways.
Thank you for that. Okay, so some other questions around maintenance in regards to Van Avenue specifically. Someone asked, did we answer this one? I think we actually answered that one. But someone had a question related to Van Avenue, not necessarily about the entrance ways, but they want to know, has a study on possible crime increased due to unwanted possible people being able to flow freely from Van into the park been done? Plus, how many people are going to be able to park on Van in order to access the park?
So I'm not sure I can address that entire question, but with respect to parking on Van, there isn't any dedicated parking. It's just, and it's not advertised as such. It's not intended to be vehicular. There's no vehicular access along Van, nor again, dedicated parking for that access point. It's primarily a pedestrian and bicycle access point.
I think signage will lead you mainly to the main entrance on Pratt Drive and not the neighborhood entrance.
Another question specifically about Van is, oh, you lost my place. A lot of questions coming in. Give me 1 second. What is the plan for redirecting water that floods and stands where the Van pathway would be?
So we would like to hear more about that from whoever the individual is that identified that as a concern. And we would like to address that as part of the project. The scope of our effort is within the project site itself, within the boundary. So if there is existing street flooding in the area, it could be a variety of causes or sources of that flooding. I will say that the project itself, based on relocating the water into the wetland via the stormwater pump station, has a significant benefit on reducing flooding in the surrounding streets. So specifically that exact location, I can't speak to it. I don't have information in front of me to speak to that specific location, but if you send us a follow-up email or give us a call and identify exactly where you're referencing, we can look into that and give you a good response.
I may be able to add a comment to address your question right now. My name is Leo, and I actually live right next to that entrance on Van.
Okay.
And usually when it rains, maybe a day or even 2 days later, there's still water flowing towards Van. Like my grass, it's still wet. The grass on that specific pathway that you guys are about to build, but all that grass is wet for maybe 2 or 3 days after the rain. Even if it's sunny, whatever it is, there's a lot of water flowing towards Van Avenue on my lot, on that lot, and the next lot. Mm-hmm. The three lots of Ryan, actually, that pathway that you guys are about to build. I just thought I would add that there. Like a lot of water keeps flowing down. Okay, bye.
And this is generally from the city's property that flows onto your property. You're referencing?
Yes, correct.
Yes, if you're familiar with the lot, because I am on the other side of the lot. If you're looking from the street, essentially from where our shed is back to where the concrete barrier is, will be standing water, and it's running down the lot, down our driveway like a water main is broken. Mm-hmm. So all spring, it was standing water for several weeks because we had so much rain.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. And Megan, as you know, your husband and myself, we manage the grass cutting of that lot. I know Aaron manages for the last 5 years. I've been helping a little bit for the last year and a half. But it's usually wet, like a week after the rain, like towards the back of that lot.
Okay. Appreciate that. We are, regrading the site, particularly that area around the buffer. As Andrew mentioned, there's going to be a swale to capture the water along that perimeter and pipe it into the direct, more into the interior of the wetland. So as we finalize the details of that design, we'll take a look at that specific location and try to understand that real local issue better, so we can design around that. So appreciate that information.
Yeah, and just a little bit of concern would be, of course, if you guys do build that pathway, if you don't build it too high, because if you do, then the water may flow towards the bottom of our houses that are raised.
Okay.
So we have to be sure of that, of course.
Yeah, so if we, when we build that ridge line, we're gonna put a secondary catchment between the ridge and your property boundaries so that we can capture that water and pull it into the site instead of it doing what you're describing. And then one thing to consider, just keep in mind that right now, the site does not have a stormwater outfall of any kind. So it's completely reliant on infiltration to drain. So even though we're going to be bringing more water into the site as a result of this project, the drainage will effectively be improved.
Great point, Andrew.
So thank y'all again for those comments around maintenance and buffers. As mentioned, we're going to share a poll following this meeting, just so you can weigh in a more in another way if you have other ideas as far as those two topics. And that is a topic that we have heard since the beginning of the project that we fully acknowledge. And we will be providing more clarity around those two topics of maintenance and buffers as the project continues to develop into final design and completion. So some general questions that we have that came in, one being, has there been discussion of the New Orleans School Board property, the old Francis Gregory site and its future? So this is a question that we addressed earlier on, and we have met with the school board at the offset of the project. But Joel or Nina, do y'all want to weigh on and just give a brief recap on what that discussion was about with them?
They haven't shared any specific plans or any timelines for redeveloping that area into a school. They are hanging on to the property. So exactly what their needs are facility wise would be something that they could address, but they haven't shared anything with our design team about their future plans.
Yeah, there's nothing on the books like at the moment immediately, that they could have, that they can share or that they're planning. However, I know when we polled some residents early on at kickoff of the project, it seems like there is in general a desire to have a school back there again of some sorts by most residents. So, but yeah, as I mentioned, we don't know, we don't have any information on a particular plan at this point.
And we have worked with them to carve out an easement. The access road is on school board property. So we're actually using their property to access the project site. And we're working with them on that effort.
And the next question is, how long would the walking trail be?
So I just did a little takeoff to answer that question. Excluding the multi-use path, it will be 7,100 linear feet. And if you include all of the pedestrian trails on the whole site, it is 8,550 feet.
Okay, and I believe that is all the questions we have in the chat. Let me do one more scroll. Oh, someone else asked, what are the white circles on the map? Not sure which map they're referring to, but.
I think they're referring to the rendering, that the white circles are existing trees that are native species that will be retained and not removed.
Do you remember what slide is on, Andrew?
Just any of the ones that shows the site plan. They're kind of like transparent circles with a thick white outline on them.
And Andrew, I just did the quick math too. It's approximately 1.6 miles then for people that think in miles versus linear feet.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay, so the person who asked that question, I think it was Jesse. If that's not clear, please feel free to respond again in the chat. But everything else are just notes that we'll take to go into the surveys that we'll send out and other ideas around the fencing structure. Coach Landrum, I see your comment also. So I'll reach back out to you about that. And I believe that's it. If there aren't any other questions, we're gonna move on. I'll give people a few seconds to type any additional ones if they have them. Okay, I think that's all for right now. But as we share, once again, we're going to send out those surveys. So make sure that you do weigh in on that survey when it comes out, just so that we can make sure we're documenting all of the feedback shared tonight. But also, if you know somebody who couldn't attend tonight, please share that information with them and the opportunity to share their ideas as well. So you can go to the next slide. Okay, so our next event for this project is the Educator Roundtable, which we kind of briefly touched on at the beginning of this presentation. So tentatively, it is scheduled for next Thursday, November 11th, between 5 to 7 p.m. And it will be held virtually as well, similarly to this meeting. And the idea is to gather with formal and informal educators to discuss the classroom and education spaces that are being proposed for this project. So if you are an educator or you know of an educator who would love to be a part of this conversation, please feel free to reach out to us so that we can get you the invitation details so you could be a part of that discussion. And I think you can go to the next slide. And that is all I have for today. So I think Elizabeth, you're going to take it off from here.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much, Joe, Tiana, Andrew, and Nina for your responses and information. Also, how to stay connected. You can email roadwork@nola.gov to join the mailing list for project updates. You can also follow project progress and learn about other resilience projects in Gentilly by going to www.nola.gov/resilience. You can also visit the project webpage at www.nola.gov/resilience-sustainability/gentilly-district-dealer-wetlands. So you can get information about the project there. And to get more information about the Sleeve Up NOLA campaign, you can visit ready.nola.gov for more information. Also, I wanted to invite y'all, there is an unveiling of two sculptures, the Unity and Harmony sculptures, and this is happening this Sunday at 3:30 p.m. With our Arts New Orleans, Arts Council New Orleans is one of the partners, and so the unveiling of these two very nice sculptures is going to happen Sunday at November 7th and 3:30 p.m. So after the Saints games, please, you're welcome to come. The address that we're going to be meeting at is 5000 Warrington Drive. So please come and join us. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we will follow up with the email, and we appreciate your time and your concerns. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.